This video discusses ongoing legal proceedings and includes sensitive subject matter. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. The information shared is based on publicly available reports and testimonies. Viewer discretion is advised. A former stylist has stepped forward in the ongoing case involving Sean Diddy Combs, sharing quiet but powerful details about what he witnessed while working closely with Cassie Ventura. This video respectfully explores Deonte Nash's testimony and what it may reveal. Number 1. The stylist steps forward. Deonte Nash was not just a stylist. He was someone trusted to be part of the most intimate parts of an artist's daily life. Travel, preparation, downtime, and the quiet in-between moments that the public never sees. As Cassie Ventura's former stylist, Nash spent long hours behind the scenes, witnessing not only the glamour of fame, but the emotional reality that often accompanied it. His testimony in the ongoing federal case involving Sean Diddy Combs wasn't sensational. It was steady, specific, and grounded in what he personally observed. And for many listening, it added a new layer to an already complex story. In court, Nash detailed the environment he experienced while working with Cassie during her relationship with Combs. His position wasn't that of a distant outsider, but rather someone who often traveled with them, worked in close proximity, and saw how moments unfolded both on and off the stage. He shared that Cassie, on numerous occasions, confided in him, not always directly with words, but in the way she carried herself, the subtle emotional cues, and the silences that spoke louder than anything else. One of the core elements of Nash's testimony was the shift in Cassie's demeanor. He recalled seeing her express hesitation or unease before certain events, only to later appear emotionally withdrawn. Nash didn't make sweeping claims or accusations. His testimony centered on his own reactions to what he saw and the consistent sense of discomfort he felt on her behalf. His words painted a picture not of scandal, but of concern. A concern that built over time, as he noticed patterns that didn't feel right. What makes Nash's account particularly significant is the nature of his role. Stylists are often among the few people allowed into the private world of artists. They see vulnerability. They hear what others don't. And in this case, Nash used his voice not for attention, but for truth, as he experienced it. He acknowledged that while he didn't witness every conversation or moment, what he did observe was enough to leave a lasting impression. As this testimony unfolded, it became clear that his role as a stylist gave him not just access, but insight. His perspective didn't come from tabloids or speculation. It came from lived experience. And as we'll explore next, it was just the beginning of a much deeper story. Number 2. A birthday celebration turns concerning. In 2015, Cassie Ventura was preparing to celebrate her 29th birthday, a milestone many might associate with joy, reflection, and being surrounded by those who uplift you. But according to Deonte Nash's testimony, what should have been a carefree celebration slowly took on a more complex tone. Nash was there that night, not just as a stylist, but as someone Cassie had come to trust in close quarters. And what he remembered wasn't the laughter or the festivities. It was the tension just beneath the surface. Nash described the setting, a gathering meant to highlight Cassie's special day, complete with the usual markers of luxury and entertainment. But instead of feeling relaxed and supported, Cassie appeared anxious. Nash testified that she didn't want to participate in a particular segment of the evening's plans, one that involved dancing and being the center of attention in a way she didn't seem comfortable with at the time. While the request may have seemed small to outsiders, Nash said it was clear that Cassie's reluctance wasn't about shyness. It was something deeper. He went on to explain that Cassie voiced this hesitation directly to Diddy. She said she didn't want to dance. And yet, despite her clear expression of discomfort, she ended up participating anyway. Nash didn't describe any loud arguments or dramatic scenes. What stood out to him was the quiet way her boundaries seemed to dissolve under pressure. He explained that Cassie didn't raise her voice. She didn't cause a scene, but she also didn't seem to have the space to say no and be heard. From Nash's view, this wasn't an isolated moment. It was emblematic of a pattern where Cassie's personal choices appeared to be sidelined in favor of keeping peace or meeting expectations. For a birthday celebration, that in itself spoke volumes. Nash said he remembered her body language. Tense, reserved, not at all what you'd expect from someone being honored at their own party. It's important to acknowledge that no single moment tells the entire story. But in a case where many voices are now sharing pieces of the puzzle, this birthday evening became more than just a memory. It became a symbol. A subtle but powerful example of how personal boundaries, even in seemingly small moments, can carry a much heavier emotional weight. And while that night ended quietly, what followed in the days and months ahead began to reveal something far more serious. Number 3. Witnessing emotional strain. As the days working with Cassie turned into weeks and months, Deonte Nash began to notice something that couldn't be ignored. emotional strain that lingered just beneath the surface. In his testimony, he didn't claim to have all the answers. Instead, he described a series of moments. Observations. Quiet changes in Cassie's behavior that, taken together, painted a picture of someone under significant pressure. Nash recalled seeing Cassie return from private conversations with Diddy looking visibly upset. Not every time, but often enough that it stood out. Sometimes her eyes would be puffy, as though she had been crying. Other times, she would retreat inward, speaking less, smiling less, choosing silence when she'd normally be expressive. As someone tasked with making her feel confident in her appearance, Nash was attuned to her mood. It was part of the job. And when those moods shifted, it became harder and harder for him to ignore. What stood out most to Nash wasn't dramatic outbursts. It was the absence of joy. He shared that even during high-profile events or glamorous shoots, Cassie didn't seem fully present. It was as if something else was weighing her down, something that dimmed her light from the inside out. He described it as a slow fade. Not one sudden change, but a quiet erosion of the confident, vibrant energy she once brought to every room. One moment that particularly stayed with him was when Cassie quietly confided in him that she felt like she was losing herself. She didn't go into great detail, but her tone was heavy. She said she didn't feel like she had the freedom to make certain choices without worrying about how it would be received. Nash didn't pry, but he listened. And from then on, he began to pay even closer attention to the unspoken signs. These emotional cues, the hesitation, the fatigue, the subtle changes in Cassie's expressions, may not have been obvious to everyone around her. But Nash saw them. He was there when the makeup came off, when the events were over, and the lights went down. And what he witnessed told a story of emotional wear and tear. It's important to note that Nash didn't present this as conclusive evidence of wrongdoing. Rather, his testimony underscored a consistent emotional climate, one that suggested Cassie may have been navigating far more than the public ever realized. And while emotional strain is often hard to quantify, the moments Nash described hinted at deeper challenges. Challenges that would soon take a more visible and troubling form. Number 4. Allegations of physical altercations. Among the most serious parts of Deonte Nash's testimony came when he quietly and carefully described moments that went beyond emotional discomfort. According to Nash, there were times when the strain Cassie was under became more than just visible. It became physical. While he was measured in his words, what he shared left a lasting impression on the courtroom. Nash recounted an incident that, to this day, still stood out in his memory. He described seeing Cassie with what he believed to be a black eye. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation in front of him. There wasn't yelling or a scene. What there was, according to Nash, was a visible mark, a silence around how it got there, and a quiet tension that filled the air. He didn't feel it was his place to ask directly, but the unspoken message was clear. Something had happened, and no one seemed willing to talk about it openly. He explained that moments like these weren't everyday occurrences, but they were memorable. He remembered feeling a growing discomfort about the environment, especially when Cassie's demeanor shifted after certain private interactions. There were days when she appeared nervous, uneasy, like she was trying to hold herself together. These weren't things he could prove with photos or video, but as someone who worked alongside her daily, he felt something wasn't right. What made his account especially notable was that he wasn't trying to make bold declarations. Instead, he spoke carefully, emphasizing what he saw, what he felt, and how it affected his view of the situation. Nash said he began to feel protective of Cassie in those moments, not just as her stylist, but as someone witnessing what he believed was a young woman navigating an emotionally heavy and possibly unsafe situation. It's important to acknowledge that Nash's testimony reflects one person's observations, and he did not claim to have seen acts of harm take place directly. But in legal proceedings like this, those observations matter. They form part of a larger picture, one that helps paint a more complete understanding of the dynamics at play behind closed doors. His words didn't come with accusations. They came with concern. And as more details come to light, his account adds weight to what others have already shared. Because sometimes, what's not said out loud still speaks volumes. And as his testimony continued, the picture of control and influence would become even clearer. Number 5. Threats and control. As Deonte Nash continued his testimony, the focus turned to a more complex and emotionally charged topic: control. Not in the overt, theatrical way that tabloids might imagine, but in the subtle, persistent ways that influence can quietly shape someone's choices and self-worth. Nash spoke about a dynamic between Cassie and Sean Diddy Combs that, in his view, often revolved around the pressure to comply, the fear of consequences, and the emotional weight of unspoken expectations. According to Nash, there were times when Cassie expressed feeling like her decisions weren't entirely her own. While she didn't go into great detail, the tone of those conversations stayed with him. She hinted that stepping out of line, or even expressing discomfort, might come with a price. whether it was related to her career, her personal relationships, or simply wanting some space. Nash said there seemed to be an underlying fear that saying no would lead to fallout she wasn't prepared to face. He recalled one situation where Cassie seemed especially anxious after declining to participate in a public event. Nash said she confided that she worried it would cause tension with Diddy. She didn't say he had threatened her outright, but her fear of upsetting him was real. And that fear, in itself, felt like a kind of control. Nash also shared that Cassie would often make choices that seemed more about avoiding conflict than expressing her own desires. She might agree to last-minute trips, attend events when she felt drained, or change her appearance to match a particular vision, all while masking how she truly felt inside. Nash described it not as a series of dramatic confrontations, but as a slow erosion of agency, where her sense of independence quietly slipped away. What made these stories especially compelling was the fact that they weren't told with anger or bitterness. Nash didn't sound like someone out for revenge. He sounded like someone who had spent a lot of time watching someone he cared about walk a very fine line, trying to keep the peace, trying to stay safe, and slowly losing her voice in the process. These patterns, while hard to quantify, can speak volumes in a courtroom. Because when control doesn't come from loud commands, it often shows up in silence, in fear, in hesitation. And for Nash, the signs were impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just Cassie who felt the impact. As Nash went on to share, the atmosphere of fear and power extended far beyond one relationship. Number 6, impact on others. While much of Deonte Nash's testimony centered around his time with Cassie Ventura, it became clear that what he experienced wasn't limited to just her. As the trial continued, Nash began to shed light on a broader pattern, one where the emotional tone set behind the scenes seemed to affect more than just one person. According to his account, the atmosphere surrounding Sean Diddy Combs wasn't always stable, and the effects of that tension reached others within his professional and personal circle. Nash described a working environment that, at times, felt unpredictable. There were moments of calm and celebration, but also stretches of tension that seemed to build quietly, only to be released in sharp, unexpected ways. He spoke about witnessing moments where others in the crew, assistants, stylists, creatives, walked on eggshells, uncertain of how the energy in the room might shift. It wasn't about constant confrontation. Instead, it was the weight of possibility, the sense that one wrong move or misspoken word could cause a ripple. In one instance, Nash recalled being on the receiving end of an aggressive outburst himself. He didn't go into graphic detail, nor did he make accusations beyond what he experienced personally. But the way he described it, a sudden flare of anger, quickly followed by silence, was enough to leave a mark. Not just physically, but emotionally. It was the kind of moment that makes you question your safety, your role, and whether speaking up is even an option. What stood out during this part of his testimony was the consistency of the behavior he described. Nash wasn't suggesting that everyone was mistreated or that chaos was constant. Rather, he emphasized that there was a pattern, an undercurrent of unease that many people, including himself, seemed to feel. It wasn't always spoken aloud, but it showed up in the way people carried themselves, in the tension in their shoulders, in the way eyes darted during tense conversations. It's a reminder that environments don't just affect one person at a time. When stress, fear, or emotional volatility become part of the background, they start to shape the behavior of everyone involved. Nash's testimony helped illuminate this ripple effect. He wasn't trying to be the center of the story, but by sharing what he saw and how it affected him, he helped build a fuller picture of what was happening behind the scenes. And as more voices begin to emerge, the courtroom is slowly becoming a place where these silent moments are finally being spoken out loud. Deonte Nash's testimony offers a thoughtful look behind the scenes. His perspective adds to a growing conversation, one that's unfolding carefully and with purpose.